the Dream 100 Show. The epicenter of influence, collaboration, and exponential growth. You're about to discover the power of relationships. Dream 100 relationships. And you're one relationship away from a totally different business and life. This is your host, Michael Tasner.
So how do you avoid a Cracker Barrel moment? And dare I even say moment, I would say episode, fiasco, whatever you'd like to call it. In today's episode of the Dream 100 Show, I wanted to unpack a little bit of this fiasco with Cracker Barrel. But most importantly, I want to give you some elements that directly apply to the Dream 100 framework. And had Cracker Barrel had some of these elements in place, I do not think they would have made such a big misstep. So unless you don't watch the news at all, the Cracker Barrel, I'm just going to label it a fiasco, a $700 million mistake, was over the last 6 to 8 months, they engaged a marketing agency that went on a couple of different projects. Now, the one that we're going to laser in today is, in particular, their logo. They removed the Uncle Herschel character that was in their logo, that gave the Cracker Barrel vibe, that rustic feel. Now, they also updated lighting and they updated decor in some of the locations, new menu items, because it's showing, the data is showing that sales and foot traffic are down roughly 15%. It was showing, the market research that is, that they're like right in the middle of the pack by way of value and convenience and experience and food. Like they weren't way at the top, they weren't way at the bottom, they were kind of in the middle. And when I was looking at and starting to unpack the rabbit holes they went down and how did they get to this place where they decided to remove the Uncle Herschel figure, character, drawing, and really take that nostalgic piece away. Now, they were aiming to appeal to the younger demographic. A lot of brands are trying to figure out how do we appeal and how do we bring in the younger demographic. If the average age of your demographic is 70 or 80 years old, regardless of what industry you're in, outside of like senior living, you're going to be in for an uphill battle if that is the only demographic that you're attracting. Sooner than later, they're not all going to be around. So they did some research, they did some focus groups, they talked to employees, customers, potential customers. But when I really dug in, they missed one core aspect. They missed the emotional tie. Unfortunately, when you go down a path of wanting to put together focus groups or doing customer surveys, you want to have data that is statistically significant, essentially. You want to make sure that you're asking the same types of questions. So let's say, for example, you ask 10 people that worked with your landscaping business a couple of questions on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the best, 1 being the worst. How would you rate your recent cut to your lawn? Number 2, how would you rate the value? And you would ask a couple of those questions. And then you want to ask those exact same questions to all the customers that you're interviewing so that you don't sway something, and then that data becomes something that you can actually take action on. So if all of your customers rate the recent lawn service a 1 or a 2, you can very quickly start to see what the potential issue is that you need to focus on. But if you ask variations of that question or you deviate, the data becomes less significant. Maybe one customer you say, rate on a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate your recent cut? Number 2, you might ask somebody else, on a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate our promptness of your recent cut? And they might give that a 5. But if you're asking different questions for that first question or whatever that one in the order to different people, it doesn't become significant. It's tough to draw conclusions. But they missed that emotional aspect. So when you're doing surveys, when you're getting feedback, when you're doing focus groups, you need to have some open-ended questions available that are going to pull out other emotions. They're going to pull out other feelings. They're going to tug on someone's heartstrings. They're going to get someone to open up. They're going to get someone to start storytelling. Now, let me give you an example. So you're asking these questions. You're a landscaping business. We're talking about, let's say, the cutting process for now. So weekly cuts. And you could ask your standard questions, but if you were looking at getting more robust feedback, you're going to want to ask some open-ended questions. Now, the most basic of questions, is there anything that we could have done better? And then that question will start to take you down some rabbit holes and you'll get a variety of feedback. But if you want to start to pull out some of the emotional elements, you might ask something like this. I know that most people use our landscaping service because they want to get more time back with their family. They want to have more time with their family and doing less of the chores around the house. Are there some important moments, or are there some times when you've been able to use that extra time that you save to do something fun or different with your family? You might say, well, Michael, that's a really odd question. And while it does sound a little bit odd, I'm looking for their brain to get triggered and to just pause and start thinking, and ideally starting to rattle off some emotions. Well, yeah, that's actually true, because my daughter, she had her first birthday. We actually had it at the house, and you guys were able to come a couple days early to get the lawn looking great. I actually got a lot of compliments on how great the lawn looked, and there were so many different things that were going on during that birthday party that I never in a million years would have had time to get the lawn ready and perfect and the weeds whacked and everything looking good for this party. So you actually saved both my wife and I a whole bunch of time. I'm so grateful. I'm looking for people to start telling stories, but looking at how your brand, how your product, how your service, how your restaurant, your retail outlet, whatever you are doing, how does it connect to them emotionally? If I jump over to Cracker Barrel, what they failed to realize was how emotionally connected their customers were to the Uncle Herschel figure. They didn't realize the core memories, we're going to come back to that in just a second, their customers had. Seeing that logo, seeing the experience in walking in. They didn't want something that's new and fancy and shiny. They liked that Cracker Barrel was different. They didn't ask enough of the emotional questions to realize how closely tied in their customers were with the rusticness. They focused on kind of asking some leading questions from what I've gathered. They focused on getting things that were statistically significant. But when you don't bake in some more open-ended questions that correlate back to emotions, you're going to potentially go down the wrong rabbit hole. So if you come back to this notion of core memories, if their customers didn't care, like any logo is fine, and I want to only go there for the food. People, I promise you, are not just going to Cracker Barrel for the food. I recently ate there. The food that I had was absolutely terrible, actually. But one of my core memories was the old-fashioned store, the old-fashioned candy that you can purchase, the rocking chairs that are out front, the crappy lighting that was all throughout the locations. And my core memories were from when I would be traveling. The only times that I have ever been to Cracker Barrels is when I am traveling, when I'm driving to a different state. That's the only time that I've ever stopped. I don't seek them out. If I have those core memories and those emotions, and you were to ask me about my experience at Cracker Barrel, but tell me about an experience you had 10 years ago. Not just, well, tell me what do you like about Cracker Barrel, or what do you want to see at a Cracker Barrel. Tell me about the feelings that you get. Tell me about the feelings that you get when you look at our logo. I can assure you that people had strong feelings if it went to social media and ended up blowing up very, very quickly. Now, unfortunately, Cracker Barrel and this logo change wound up in the likes of controversies like the recent Bud Light controversy. Now, unfortunately, that is a different type of controversy, but it's a controversy nonetheless. And they were not getting to a point where the brand was going to necessarily be canceled or anything like that, but they received a ridiculous amount of backlash. Now, thankfully, within an 8-day period, they decided and they said, we heard your feedback, we listened to you, we made a mistake, we're reverting back to our old logo. They rapidly gauged the sentiment online and realized that very little, if any, of the feedback was actually positive. So where, again, did they miss the mark? And where can you, as an entrepreneur, make sure that you don't ever have this happen to you? But even more importantly, how do you use this stuff to your advantage? So they, again, missed the mark when it came to getting emotional data. Your customers, your prospects, they're making emotional buying decisions. Very few people are making decisions logically. Some of the best books on marketing, and when I say best, I would say ones that give you the most return on your time as an investment, are books around psychology and persuasion. And all the books talk about the emotional side of things. People are getting people and businesses to take emotional reactions, emotional decisions. So when you want to get feedback about how you're doing, about how your brand is perceived, you can ask your questions that give you some hard data and ranking scores and things like that. But I also want you to make sure that you're asking, how does our brand make you feel? What emotions do you feel? What emotions do you think about when you hear our brand name, our logo, when you walk into one of our stores? How do you feel? How did you feel 5 years ago or 10 years ago? Companies evolve over time. They hopefully grow. They hopefully open more locations and get bigger. So you're going to have to adopt and adapt. Both adopt and adapt. Adopt new things, adapt to new things. You're going to have to constantly be moving forward, but you always want to have a pulse. And I can tell you that your customers might value some of the little things so much more than you ever realized. But you get so busy, so caught up in all the day-to-day that you lose that closeness to your customer. Your core action for today, I always give you actions. Every episode has one action, is to conduct a thorough customer survey so that you can get a flavor as to how you are being perceived. What do people like, don't like, and what feelings and emotions are they thinking about and interacting with, talking about with other people, so that as you continue to grow, you can make sure that you're always staying close to the customer, but you're staying close to those feelings and those emotions. Don't make the Cracker Barrel mistakes. Do not go down that path. Stay heavily connected to your customer, and it doesn't mean you have to stay completely true to your roots. If your customers are not connected to certain things, you can continue to evolve, but you have to be hyper aware. You've got to get all different perspectives, and you get that by those open-ended questions so that you actually know what tugs on their heart. And that is the aspect that's going to make or break the sale. Get out there, take some action, get this customer survey done, grab the emotional elements, and you will continue to soar. Michael Tasner signing off. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. I'll see you next week.